Hey everybody, welcome to our bootcamp setup video for Microsoft SQL Server. So we're going to teach you a little bit about SQL, a little bit about SQL Server today, and then we're going to jump right into getting things set up so that we can start working with SQL hands-on. We believe that you'll learn best by actually trying things out. So we want to get you all set up and ready to go by watching this video and following along. So what is Microsoft SQL Server? It's a relational database management system. You'll also hear that called RDBMS or DBMS, sold by Microsoft. And then let's look at what SQL is and what a server is, because this says SQL Server in the title. Well, what's SQL? Well, it turns out that SQL is structured query language. It's pretty common for people to get confused between SQL Server and SQL. But SQL is a language that's used to manage relational databases, specifically to query for data from databases, but also to create, update, and delete data. We can add data to the database using it. So even though it says query in the title, as part of the acronym, it actually can be used to do a lot of things with the database. It is an ANSI standard. What that means is that there is a standard out there for SQL, and vendors, including Microsoft, can extend it, and their version is known as T-SQL or Transact SQL. SQL statements in the language itself are categorized into three different areas. Actually, there's four if we add the transaction, but we always think of these three as part of the standard, which is the data manipulation language, which is where we can query and modify data. That's the thing that you would expect to do most of. The data definition language, which allows us to define database structure, create new tables, define columns and tables and things like that. And then the data control language, which is used to give us user and group access control. There's this fourth one, transaction control language, which deals with how we control database transactions. So what's a database server? If we look here with our pointer, if we imagine a computer running the Microsoft SQL Server software, it would have as part of its storage a database, and all a database is a file or set of files that the program, the server software, uses to write data and get data from. And we can have many different types of clients that connect to this server over a network, typically, but the clients can be different types. We can have desktop computers, laptops, and what's prevalent nowadays is phones, and all of those could connect to a database server. So those are considered clients, and you'll hear a term called client-server computing, and this is a case in point of what that looks like. So to interact with the server, what you do is you issue commands over the network. The server knows how to interpret those commands and do something with them. And for example, you may say, give me the payroll data for this employee, and it would know how to interpret that, get the data from the database, and send it back to you. So we're not going to focus a whole lot about what goes on in between these, but it's important for you to keep in your mind that there is a client part and a server part, and the server sits there running all the time waiting to respond to client requests. The clients will be using SQL or SQL, structured query language, to interact with the database server. That's the language that we use. No matter what relational database management service it is, almost all of them use SQL. The other thing to keep in mind is that we can have the client and the server programs running on the same computer, and that's how we're going to set things up. We'll be installing the following. We're going to install SQL Server. We're going to install SQL Server Management Studio, or SSMS, and we're going to install a sample database. So let's go ahead and get started with that. And so I'm going to kill our slideshow here and jump over to the browser. And if I do a Google search for SQL Server Express, I notice that what comes up is SQL Server 2016 Express Edition. So the Express Edition of SQL Server is free. It's pretty much a full-blown version of SQL Server. It's limited in its capacity, but it's a great tool to learn on because it is free. SQL Server Management Studio, if I did a search for that, SQL Server Management Studio, the first link would say, go download this. And this is essentially going to give us a client tool that lets us interact with the database server. And finally, we're going to be looking for the AdventureWorks sample database from CodePlex. So you'll see those 3 Google queries in there that you can use. Now, as I get into these installs, what I'm going to do is start them, and then I'll pause the video while it finishes, because there's no point in you sitting here watching my computer download files or go through a lengthy install process. So I'll try to unpause at the points that might make sense for you to where you might have to make a decision or something like that. So let's start off with going and getting the SQL Server 2016 Express Edition. So SP1 just means that there's been a service pack released on this, and so the latest one. And if you're watching this video later than 2016, there will be other editions out there, and Microsoft's been really good about always having an Express Edition. So download whatever version that is that makes sense to you. I'm going to go ahead and click download now. It's going to download a small installer file, which I'm going to go ahead and run. And I'm running Windows 10. So I'm going to tell it can go ahead and do that. And the nice thing about SQL Express Edition is they've really simplified the install. So let's start out with just doing a basic install. So just click on basic, and you'll want to agree to the terms, and it asks you where you want to install it, and just hit install, and it's going to go ahead and do that. So I'll pause the video and come back when it comes up with a question or prompt, or when it's finished. Okay, so we got to this screen. So the installation, it says the installation is completed successfully. The instance name is called SQL Express. This will be important as we connect. So this is the server instance name, and it's using my local, and it just installed with my local Windows account. And then it shows what essentially got installed. And so we're going to go ahead and have it install SQL Server Management Studio. So I'm going to click that button. And that's actually going to launch to the same page that I would have been on if I would have gone to this the other way. We'll hit download here. This is a larger download, so I'm going to go ahead and pause again, and when this is done, we'll go through the install on this. Okay, so our download's completed, so let's go ahead and open this up. So we're going to install this, and we'll say yes. And again, I'm going to pause this while it installs. Okay, it's telling me that I've got to restart my computer in order to complete the setup. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and we'll resume the recording when that's done. Okay, so the restart's happened. Now we need to go get our sample database. So if I click on this link, it's going to download that file. It'll take a few minutes to do that. We'll go ahead and wait on this one because it's about done. So I am going to take that and move it to another location on my hard drive. I'll just put it in the trash folder. You could put it any place you wanted and extract it. And what we're going to end up with is this file right here, AdventureWorks 2014.bak. Now .bak is typical as a SQL Server backup file. So we will we'll now go ahead and get that restored. So to do that, we need to fire up SQL Server Management Studio. So if I type SSMS, SQL Server Management Studio, let's launch that. SQL Server should now be installed and running. So remember, we talked about there being a client and server part of this. So when this comes up, it should be able to connect to that database. We can close this browser. We don't need that anymore. So this will take a few minutes to start up the first time. I'm going to pause the recording so that you don't have to watch this. Okay, here we go. Launching SQL Server Management Studio. The first thing it wants to do is have know what to connect to, a database to connect to. So if you look down here your username, you should have your machine name here. So put that in, followed by a backslash, followed by the name of the instance. Remember, the name of the instance was SQL Express. And then you can hit connect, and it will then have you're now connected to SQL Server. So what you're seeing here is a client tool, SQL Server Management Studio, that lets us look at and work with a database. So that's what we've got. And this tells us that our database is running. Now you need to be aware that this is a service that is now running on your machine. It's going to take power, it's going to take battery if you're running on a laptop. You can see it running out here, either through Task Manager, but if you'll just type Services in Control Panel and View Local Services and scroll down to SQL Server, here's the instance running, and you'll notice it's running and it's set to automatically start up. If for some reason you're worried about the battery, you can go ahead and shut this down and just start it up when you need it. However, if it's not running when you launch SQL Server Management Studio, SQL Server Management Studio won't be able to connect. So now we have a server and we have a client. There are no databases in here yet, so the next thing we're going to do is restore that database. So we'll get set up to do that, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, so to restore this database, it's really very easy to do. All we do is highlight database here by left clicking on it. Right click once that's highlighted and select Restore Database. And what we want to do is select Device because we're going to restore it from the file system. So let me slow down a little bit. Here's the device that we want to restore from. So we need to pick the file name. Make sure backup media type is set to file. Hit add and go down to wherever you stored this. Remember, mine was in the trash folder, but wherever you wanted to put it is fine. Highlight it, hit OK. Hit OK again. And it'll come up with this checked and selected. So it recognizes that this is a database backup. And if you hit OK, it will restore that database and say it's restored successfully. Now that database appears here, and if you'll notice, you can open it up and see some of the tables. Now we're gonna get into how to navigate more in SQL Server Management Studio and what these tables are and how to use them and start writing some SQL. But just as a really quick example, let's pick our person address and just do a right click and select the top 1,000 rows. It'll go and run this SQL query and pull the data back from the database. So we have a fully populated database that we're going to be working with. So that'll make it easy for us to learn how to query, and then eventually we'll get to the point where we can create our own database. So I hope this has been useful for you to get set up and ready to start learning more about Microsoft SQL Server and SQL. So get ready for the next video. It'll be coming out soon, and we will get into basic querying of the data. Thanks for watching.